Creating a two-tier cake that stands tall and doesn't collapse is all down to your structure. So if you want to create a two-tier cake and you don't want to be afraid that your cake is going to collapse, let me share with you some basic principle on how to create a two-tier or even a multi-tier cake that will stand tall. The cake that I made survived transportation, survived being moved 3 times in the venue, and it did not collapse. And it was all down to having the right cake structure. First principle, you want to make sure that the actual cake has been structured and decorated properly. So in this cake, I have used ganache. So I have a cake that is well decorated, well structured. And the same principle, when you create your buttercream cake, make sure that all the layers are stacked nicely, you've done a crumb coating, and you've covered the cake nicely. Second principle, you want to have a central dowel. This is a dowel that will go all the way through and will basically anchor the cake to the center of your cake board. If you don't know how to create a central dowel in your cake board, I have a detailed tutorial that will show you exactly how to make this. When you have a central dowel, you have two options. You can insert the central dowel when you're decorating the cake at the start, or you can decorate your cake and then put it into the dowels, or you can stack your cake and then insert the dowels. Either way, make sure that you have actually prepared the dowel. The dowel is anchored very nicely to your cake board so that it stands straight. The function of the central dowel is basically to act like the central beam. If you think about a house or a wall, they usually have some structural walls which are the load bearing part of the structure. So your central dowel is the load bearing structure of your cake, and it anchors everything together. Now I'm trimming the central dowel, but you see that I'm leaving a little bit sticking up. This bit is going to sit into the next tier. So again, the second tier will still be anchored on the central dowel. So a central dowel is essential if you're going to make a multi-tiered cake that will stand the test of time. So the next thing we're going to be doing is to be putting the middle dowels. Now, when you put your next tier on top of this tier, you don't actually want that whole weight of your second tier to be held by the sponge cake because cake is soft. If you don't put any dowels in this manner, what happens is all that weight of your second tier will be directly transmitted onto the bottom tier cake, causing it to collapse. So these middle dowels are going to be like silt. So the weight of the next tier is actually going to be sitting on these dowels. So this is another important step when you're making a multi-tiered cake. So you can see where I'm putting these dowels. This is actually going to be where the next tier is going to be sitting on. So I'm using 6 in total. You should use at least 4. Again, the number that you use depends on the size of your next tier and how tall it is. You want to have enough dowels that's going to take the weight of your next tier. So here I'm just, measuring them, and you want it to be flush with your cake so that it's not sticking out too much, but at the same time, you don't want the dowel to be too short. Otherwise, the weight of the cake will not be transmitted onto the dowels. So you want to cut it flush. So you measure it and then you cut it. And you can see that the size of these dowels is smaller than the central dowels. And this is an acceptable size. And like I said, I'm using 6, but you can use 4. The reason I use 6 eventually is because these were 2 tall cakes. So the next tier is actually a tall cake. So you want something that's going to accommodate the weight of the next tier. And you will do this every time you're adding a next tier. So if you were making a 3-tier cake, you would do it on the second tier and above. Again, you want the weight of your cake to be transmitted on the dowels, not on the cake. So you can see that when I'm going to put the next cake on there, the cake board and that cake will be sitting and be held up on those dowels. And you repeat the process for each dowel. Now, a clever way what you can do, rather than marking each one, you can mark one and then you will use that as your reference dowel and then cut all the rest of the dowels to that same size. And then once you've done that, place it inside your cake. So this is how your dowels should look. You can just about see the dowels, but they're not sticking up too much. And these are going to support the weight of your cake nicely. What I like to do is to just apply some buttercream, or if you're using ganache in this case, just to gently cover the holes, just to make a nice neat finish. And this is the third step in which that you need to do to ensure that when you create a two-layered cake or a multi-layered cake, you create a good structure. Now, doing this will pay you dividends and will absolutely help you create a cake that is not going to collapse. And now that you've created your cake, all you've got to do is place the next tier onto the cake. It will sit nicely, and there you have created your two-layer cake that will stand tall and will not collapse. Save this video for when you need it, follow this principle, and you will have cakes that stay nice and tall. Happy baking!